Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will analyze the character of Inspector Goole in J.B. Priestley's play An Inspector Calls. If you need a recap of the plot of this play, check out my animated 7-minute summary listed in the description below. As the title suggests, Inspector Goole is probably the most important character in this play, but also, strangely, the one we know the least about. The author doesn't really give us any clues about his past or even what he looks like, and we never learn any personal details about him at all. One thing we are told is that he's a police inspector, but by the end of the play we know that even that isn't true. So who is Inspector Goole, and why does he show up at the Burlings' house to investigate them? Priestley never reveals outright the identity of this mysterious inspector, but there are a lot of clues we can put together to make our own assumptions. The first clue lies in the name Goole, which sounds exactly the same as the word ghoul, and hints that there may be more to the inspector than meets the eye. Let's take a look at the initial stage directions, and keep in mind that as this is a play, the stage directions are really important to quote in your essays or exams where you can, as they give additional information about the characters and how they portray themselves that we can't get from just the dialogue. The lighting should be pink and intimate until the inspector arrives, and then it should be brighter and harder. Up until now, the Burlings have been in a cozy little bubble of blissful ignorance, looking at the world through their rose-colored glasses, but the inspector's arrival is about to change that, as he plans to put their actions under a spotlight and force them to take accountability. The inspector need not be a big man, but he creates at once an impression of massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness. He is a man in his 50s, dressed in a plain darkish suit of the period. He speaks carefully, weightily, and has a disconcerting habit of looking hard at the person he addresses before actually speaking. This impression of massiveness phrase implies that the inspector is not a man who will be easily swayed by the Burlings' wealth and social class. It also tells us that he is a major character in this play, and indeed he is responsible for driving the whole story forward with his investigation into Eva Smith's suicide and the new information that he brings to light about each suspect. Priestley reveals that he likes to stare down the people he speaks to, which not only shows that he will not be intimidated by anyone in the room, but also that he is a figure of authority who seems to know every detail of the case and the secrets of each character before they even speak. It would have been very unusual for a working-class man to be the dominant character in a room full of the wealthy upper class, so again, this indicates to the audience that there is something different about this mysterious inspector. Because this play involves the death of a woman, a police inspector, and the potential suspects gathered in one place, it definitely has similarities to a classic whodunit or murder mystery. But in this case, the inspector's job is not to narrow down the list of suspects to one culprit, but rather to incriminate all the characters one by one, eventually revealing through this line of questioning that they are all guilty of her death. This idea of shared responsibility or shared blame comes up often throughout the play, and is part of the wider theme of social responsibility, which I will discuss in more detail a little later. Not only is the inspector's investigation central to creating drama with the new information that it brings to light, his entrances and exits are also perfectly timed to create maximum tension. For instance, he enters just as Mr. Burling says, "A man has to mind his own business and look after himself," which foreshadows that he is there to prove him wrong. The words "cutting in" are often used before his dialogue, which shows that he is not afraid to be blunt and pushy in order to get the suspects to reveal their secrets and their guilt. And if they refuse to respond, he answers for them. Like when Mrs. Burling is evasive about why Eva Smith had come to her charity for help, he says, "It was because she was going to have a child that she went for assistance to your mother's committee." He already knows the secrets that the Burlings and Gerald are trying to hide, so the revelations are more for the benefit of the other characters and the audience. As Sheila says at the end of Act 1, "He knows, of course he knows, and I hate to think how much he knows that we don't know yet." This all-knowing behavior seems strange, since the suicide only occurred a few hours previously, but he says that his evidence comes from a letter and a sort of diary found in Eva Smith's room. While this is a somewhat plausible reason for him to have all this information, we find out at the end of the play that Goole is not really a police inspector, so he would not have access to the crime scene unless he's a close relative or friend of the deceased girl. or unless he's not really human, a supernatural figure sent to show the Burlings the error of their ways. Regardless of which theory you choose to go with, the inspector does not have any legal authority in this situation, but rather moral authority. Priestley is trying to show the audience through this twist in the story that in order for real change to come about in society, people have to hold themselves to a higher moral standard, even if they don't have to legally take accountability for their actions. If you found this video helpful so far, please give it a like, it really helps out the channel. With all this talk about morality in connection with the character of Inspector Goole, there are strong links between this play and medieval morality plays, a popular form of theatre put on for the public in medieval times, with the intention of teaching a religious moral lesson. They included stock characters, or a character in a drama that represents a stereotype. For example, a classic hero stock character would be what you see in a Disney movie, a male, brave, handsome, and reliable figure that saves the heroine who is in distress. In a morality play, the stock characters were the everyman, a person who represents the average man or woman, as well as personifications of sins and virtues, such as mercy, greed, justice, etc. The story would usually revolve around the personified vices and virtues trying to sway the everyman to make right or wrong choices, with the good side winning out in the end. If we compare these traits to An Inspector Calls, the everyman could be Eva Smith, as the inspector relates her struggles to the struggles of the entire working class when he says, "There are millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us. We are members of one body." The roles of the vices are represented in Gerald and the Burlings, who are each guilty of one of the 7 deadly sins in the Bible. Mr. and Mrs. Burling could be said to represent greed and pride, while Sheila is guilty of envy, and Gerald and Eric of lust. The inspector represents the side of virtue, of course, as in the play he is a figure of unquestionable truth and moral authority. But if this is a spin on a morality play, what are the morals that Priestley is trying to get across? Throughout the story, the inspector is a proxy for the author's own views on social responsibility, the dangers of capitalism, and the futility of war. This is why he's a rather two-dimensional character, as his only purpose is to persuade the characters and the audience of Priestley's political message. An Inspector Calls was published in 1945, right before the end of World War II, but the play is set in 1912, just before World War I begins. This was a time of huge political turmoil, and Priestley's views reflect that. The world had just experienced the horrors of 2 wars in close succession, which resulted in millions of casualties, and as you might expect, many people were tired of warfare and blamed capitalism for it. Priestley himself was a socialist, and social responsibility is therefore a major theme in this play. The inspector's main goal throughout his investigation is to get the Burlings to admit their role in Eva Smith's death, and to understand how their actions affect the lives of others. This is clear in the final act when he delivers a last message to the Burlings that sounds almost like a sermon. "We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you that the time will soon come when if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish." This last bit about fire and blood and anguish is a reference to the violence of the 2 world wars, but it is also reminiscent of the Christian description of hell. Tying in the inspector's message with Christian terminology was a clever move by Priestley, because the majority of the audience at this time in history would have been Christians, and therefore by associating his socialist views with religion, he is making it more digestible for them. Remember, up until this point, capitalism ruled the West, so these socialist ideas were new and controversial. Priestley's opinions, and therefore the inspector's, can also be seen as feminist, as it is no mistake that the person who dies is a woman instead of a man. He shows through Eva's life experiences how working-class women in their society struggled by having no power in the workplace, being taken advantage of by men, and then being judged for it. Rather than blame Eva for ending up unmarried and pregnant, which was a big no-no at the time, the inspector blames society for their treatment of her, which eventually drives her to suicide. So, to summarize, Inspector Goole is a pivotal character in An Inspector Calls, as his investigation into the Burlings and the mystery around his identity drives the entire story. Although we never learn who exactly he is, Priestley leaves quite a few hints that he is a supernatural figure who has come to deliver a message, which also happens to be Priestley's message, of social responsibility, socialism, anti-war sentiment, and even feminism. Thanks for watching, guys! Stay tuned for follow-up analysis videos soon to come. See you next time!